All right, hey, welcome to Hit. This is Chris Cicchinelli, and we're talking everything high-intensity tactics for growth. And today we're going to be talking about an awesome topic, which is trendspotting and growth. And today joining me is Valerie Jacobs from LPK, Chief Insight Innovation Officer. She's an expert when it comes to consumer behavior and growth. She's also going to give us an insight into what is trendspotting. Valerie, thanks so much for coming on doing this for us today.
Oh my God, thank you. This is really exciting.
I am super pumped because we know each other's friends, and what you've been able to do with inside of trendspotting and seeing kind of the future of business. What exactly, for somebody that's listening, doesn't really understand what is trendspotting? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of people confuse trends with fashion, like fads, what's coming down the runway. Are we doing skinny jeans or wide leg jeans or no jeans at all? But really, one of the things that I discovered throughout my education was that trends are way bigger than runways. Mm-hmm. They pop up in every single category, so you can have societal trends, mm-hmm. like what people are doing, how they are acting, what their beliefs are, their behaviors, their lifestyles and attitudes. So they're sort of at a social level, a cultural level. Mm-hmm. Then you can have them in individual categories, like what are hot products, mm-hmm. what are new things coming on the scene. You can have them in technology. So you can have them across the board. Sometimes it's about how things look and feel. So it could be about color or materials. So you could basically apply them at what I would call any altitude in business, mm-hmm. all the way from positioning your business to innovating and growing your business, mm-hmm. to like the tactical execution of marketing your business or how you talk to consumers.
Well, I guess the question I have when you say that, most people think trends are fashion. I mean, yeah. and I will tell you that being a business owner, I've learned really quickly that there are so many trends that are going on around us, and we just don't even see it. Like, think when I first got in business, it was MySpace, right? Like, everybody's on MySpace, but then there was this trend that everybody's going to Facebook, right? And then they were moving to Facebook, and then the trend was, as I was starting to see different demographics of our sales force moving in, you started seeing, well, I'm not on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Well, what's Instagram? And these are all trends that I believe, maybe is that accurate?
I mean, I guess what I would just say is the reason why you want to pay attention to mm-hmm. trends is because they are the way that we can kind of express change. Mm-hmm. And I think what you're basically charting out here is the move from one platform to another. So I just say trends are about articulating shifts from something to something, and then digging underneath that and explaining, why do we think this is happening? Like, mm-hmm. is there a certain driver? Sometimes it's, people's quest or thirst for newness, but other times there are other factors. It could be societal, it could be economic, it could be environmental or political, but there's always kind of like the drivers of change and then expressing that change. And I think most importantly, how do you capitalize on that change and position yourself for the future?
Do you think, though, when you sit back and you think about change and trending and things that are going on, I mean, is it moving faster today than, say, back in the 80s and 90s and even in the earlier 2000s? I feel like I think there's so many things that are becoming trendy. The word, at one time, everybody would go to mall, but then the trend was going to outdoor malls. But now those are those are gone, and maybe you're seeing some things that are shifting. It seems like it's going quicker.
I agree.
Okay.
Not only is it increased in terms of speed, I think trends themselves can get confusing because they can be a little bit commoditized, meaning you and I could probably make up a trend mm-hmm. and Google it and find enough evidence to prove ourselves right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think there's also a lot of misinformation out there, or you could Google what are the trends in blank and get tons of hits. So I think that it's also important to curate them and think about them in terms of your own business so that you're not getting overwhelmed.
Okay, speaking of business owners, speaking of entrepreneurs, how can trendspotting help us, in our future endeavors and driving something forward in our, respective industries? Somebody's in insurance, somebody's in, pure romance, somebody's in whatever. Why is it important for us as business owners?
So I think about trends for business owners as their practice around anticipation.
Okay.
So let's think about something that you're going to do, whether that's launch a new product, or it could be engaging with your consumers in the future.
Yeah.
That is in the future. So for us, and in my business, and I don't know if this is as much in your business, but for the businesses I work on, many times we don't launch ideas, let's call it broadly, for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a long time for a technology to come underneath something to enable an idea. And so if we just design or communicate in a way that's resonating, let's say today, in 2019, but something doesn't come into the market until 2025, it'll be great for 2019, but not so good for 2025.
Yes.
So I've always kind of talked about trends as being data from the future. So you're bringing that data from the future, you're pulling it into the now, and using that intelligence to think about your consumer and what's going to resonate with them in terms of, and like I said, it could be in terms of communication, it could be in terms of the product mix, it could be in terms of your whole business strategy, the positioning of your business. So I just kind of think of it as anticipating what the future is going to want and acting on it today.
And so it's crazy because you try to get your executive team to think, the future, and they're thinking about, oh my God, I just got to make sure that things are running in today and here and now. And I totally am on this point because I really think that, I heard this one time. It's like, if you're not trying to figure out how to put yourself out of business, somebody else is. And so those are the trends that I want to figure out, what are people going to be, acting or interacting with my brand in 5 years from now.
Right.
We think about system, the things that I thought about 3 years ago are just now being implemented. That's funny you said that. System conversion, never easy. And it's crazy. Now I have more things I need to do. And it's insane. And so many companies get paralyzed by setting up and think they have to have everything perfect. And you're kind of in this thing like, no, go to market with kind of MVP, minimum viable product.
Absolutely.
Okay. And that basically is going to help, companies kind of be able to tack to something quickly and to be able to spot something and be able to kind of align with.
Yeah. One of the things that I've thought a lot about over the course of my career is a lot of times people would tell me that they wanted the data around a trend, or they wanted me to tell them how big a trend was going to be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, most of the time when you need to start acting on a trend is when you don't actually have all that data to prove that it's going to be big. So when people wait for it to be big enough, they're late.
They missed
right.
That means the risk tolerance was probably really thin.
Yeah. So then I've always said, don't try to size the trend. Apply the trend to your business and then size the idea. Figure out if the idea is right for your consumers, which is where you hit that MVP idea you just talked about. So if you can start small, prototype something, put it in front of your leading edge consumers, see how they respond, then you can I would just say, then you're riding the wave. And I was thinking about this before coming in, and your business overall, Pure Romance has been riding trend waves or surfing the trends for years.
Yes.
That has been what I think is made you so successful, is you've ridden the waves of female empowerment, women as entrepreneurs, sexual wellness and revitalization, taking the taboo off of topics. Like, all of these things are social and cultural trends that you guys have surfed to great success.
And it's crazy because when it wasn't apropos to do these types of things back in 1993 when my mom started it, and you had people picking it outside so she was starting a trend way back when, and even into 2000s, and that is true. I didn't think about that, but that is something that we've been giving female business owners a platform for years, and no glass ceiling, the whole thing. When we think about business owners today, and we think about how important innovation is, and how to bring innovation into it, or how to not be afraid of not having the data and getting into a trend earlier. How does one, because there's so many people that are so conservative around their approach, and they want to have every piece of data before they make a decision to do something. By the time that they do it, you're right, that wave is already surfed.
Yeah. Well, I think you're tapping into probably the bane of my existence. I wish I had a great answer for you there, but I think, maybe it comes down to some business fundamentals, understanding like first mover advantage and, the risk reward equation. Mm-hmm. So,
first mover advantage. What is that?
I mean, just getting into the game first.
Okay, good.
When you get in first, you have the best chance of capturing the market share.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that.
There's risk involved in that. And, you're going to have to, you might flop.
Yeah.
But, failing is really about learning in the end. So I don't know. That one's hard to answer. It's not easy to convince people for sure.
And I think that's the thing. It's not you have to do it for a living every day. I'm trying to get my sales team or my my executives on thinking way out in the future, and I get pushback. It's like, oh, why do we want to think that far out? And I'm thinking, what? That's what's made us successful today. And sometimes we get these roadblocks put in front of us that we don't think about, or we stop watching trends. And I love having like Suzanne or some of the people that are in here, like Cheryl. They'll come to my office and say, "Hey, have you thought about like a different way we can deliver the products to our consultants and different experiences?" I'm like, and I kind of got myself into a mantra like, oh, it's going to cost too much money. Is there too much? Let's not do that. Let's just stick with the same old, because it's safe, it's easy, and it's what we know.
I think, I started LPK's Innovation Lab in 2014 to address this within our own business, because it's so funny because even if you're in the business of being where LPK is a brand and innovation consultancy, so we put all of this effort on helping our clients build amazing brands and then grow through their innovation efforts. Yeah. But sometimes it's hard to like look yourself in the mirror and do it for yourself.
Yeah.
So I think we've always been great at having a fabulous brand, but like even ourselves taking those leaps to change the way we do things and innovate on ourselves is challenging. Mm-hmm. And I find, what's fueling a lot of these disruptors is they have no rule book. Mm-hmm. They are not bound to the mindset of somebody who's protecting their core business. And often they're able to combine different core capabilities. Mm-hmm. And I actually find what you said a minute ago is very key, which is if you're not able to develop new core capabilities, you're often not going to be able to disrupt or innovate, and you stay stuck in where you are today. And so that's really
why is it, why is disrupt, when people are talking about disrupting the market, why is that such a big, I'm going to use the word trend right now, because that is a trend. Oh, yeah. I mean, you're talking about disruptive marketing, you're talking about, disruptive sales.
Yeah.
Explain that, because a lot of people might not understand exactly what that means.
Yeah, I think disruption is kind of a word that people are using to describe where I'd say heritage or legacy players have kind of gotten stuck and have not moved the needle or changed with their consumers. Yeah. What that ends up doing is creating a gap for consumers. Their needs aren't being met. Those companies aren't really listening to them. Those consumers have changed or moved on, and they were looking for something fresh. Yeah. In come people who are maybe digitally native, more tech savvy, more willing to take risks, who are maybe even more tapped into the zeitgeist of a group of people, like what are they desiring, what do they need, and they go straight in and meet that need. Yeah. Which then causes pain for those legacy players who weren't keeping up. Yeah. And so to me, that's where that is the disruption. In the old days, you usually had in any given category 1, 2, 3 big players. They were fighting it out in whatever forum they were in, and they were using big broadcast media to get their message out. So they were basically buying eyeballs, and then you would be in a physical location, and they were competing head to head. That is not how it is now. So I kind of say that used to be like King Kong versus
Godzilla.
Now it's more like King Kong on the Empire State Building with 1,000 airplanes coming at him.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's all the little players coming at you. It's like death by 1,000 cuts instead of duking it out among 3 big players. And all of those death by 1,000 cuts are all those little entrepreneurs who are coming at the big players.
And that's where this whole disruption, and is that kind of like when you look at the banking world today? I mean, like that's a long-standing thing, but the way people are now, the consumers want to interact.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my kids, you think about, you got a Race to the Bottom where it's Grubhub, it's Uber Eats, it's unbelievable what's going on with all of that. But it's crazy because my kids were like, why would I want to go to drive in my car to McDonald's when I could just have it being delivered to me?
Yeah,
I mean, I would have never.
I don't even know that they're going to buy cars.
Oh, I know. Isn't that crazy?
I don't know if they'll buy cars. I don't know if they will want to.
Yeah.
I think they're not even going to know how to drive.
Oh. You know what? That actually could save all of us in the long run. Keeping the Cicchinellis off of the road would be good.
Self-driving cars.
Yeah.
These young kids may never even have a driver's license.
I'm conspiracy theorying here, but okay. So I'm watching some things happen right now, and I'm trending and watching Uber. And I think that what's going to end up happening is Uber's going to have those self-driving cars, but they're going to be bought. Mark this down on the 25th of October. 2019, they're going to be bought. Uber's going to be bought by Chrysler or Ford or somebody where they're performing. They're making these driving cars, but it is something that I truly believe, like Uber, Trend. Then you got Lyft, and so it's amazing to see how disruption is playing in, because Uber's disruptive to the car industry. Has to be, right? I mean,
oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and so when we start thinking about this and you start looking at it, how do you now explain, out of trend setting, what innovation, and why is innovation so important today more than ever? And really, even in small businesses sometimes don't feel like they could be very innovative because they don't have the budget, they don't have the technique, they don't have an innovation lab department, whatever you might have.
I mean, I think what we've seen is that innovation is how you get your growth. Mm-hmm. So I think people maybe get hung up on that there's a set of activities or that they have to have a process or which is great. Yeah. But I think really that's what's driving growth.
Yeah.
And I think who doesn't want to grow?
Yeah. But do you think though that these, I always worry about that people they look at it as the uncertain. I'm uncertain if that idea is going to work. It sounds really good, but it's really risky. I've been selling the same thing for a long period of time. You're asking me to kind of step out and sell something different. I don't know. Well, no, this actually fits into your demographic. Like I had somebody come and say, you know what, Chris, you guys are selling, you're doing a great job with selling lotions and bedroom accessories and stuff like that. But you have, 5 million women come into the party, and this whole thing called wellness is a really big thing. This was like 6-7 years ago. Yeah. And, we started introducing wellness. I'm like, no, they come to the parties because they want to talk about, their relationship and everything else like that. Well, we were a little bit nervous. Patty was like, nope, we're going forward. We're going to do this whole wellness, piece. And it's worked out really, really well. But I would have never thought that was something we would be able to add into our lineup.
It's really interesting because I would say too that sex care is a huge part now of self-care.
Oh, I like that. Sex care. I'm going to start using that.
And that is part of overall wellness for women. Mm-hmm. And so I think that you were really right to take that and, again, surf that wave. I would also just say the health and wellness trend is not abating anytime soon. It's hitting every single category. And I would say in this year alone, practically every company that we have worked with wants to take advantage of this industry because it's basically, it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Mm-hmm. And, personal care is the big, anti-aging beauty and personal care is the biggest part of the industry, actually.
Yeah.
And then you get into a host of other things. But anyway, we have every company, whether it's juice or chemicals or, like a chemistry company, they're saying like, how do we reposition ourselves and become a more health, wellness, and lifestyle oriented business?
Okay, so I got to ask this because as I read your bio and I've seen you doing some, kind of the, initiatives when you got into this. What made you get into like this whole industry? Because this is very futuristic. It's very like you've got to be kind of dialed in to a lot going on in the world today.
Well, so I actually, here's a little bit of my background. I actually have a degree in marketing and public relations and did that for, almost a decade. And in fashion and in the arts, et cetera. And I kind of realized that I wanted to go to design school. Mm-hmm. So I went to fashion design school, which is how I ended up in Cincinnati.
UC DAP, I love it.
Yes. And I quickly realized that I did not actually want to be a fashion designer. So here I am in fashion design school and like, needle across the album,
Yeah.
But luckily, while I was doing that, I did discover fashion trends, that there was a subset of fashion design that had to do with tracking trends. So that was really intriguing to me, but I then realized that it could be applied into other categories. So very quickly, I started looking at beauty trends, then food and beverage trends. And I think when I first started, I actually had my own trend agency when I finished design school. I myself was tippy-toeing in to see, where is this going to be applicable? Yeah. Who is going to be interested in this? And so I think I got very lucky that about the time that I started doing this, trend forecasting and people caring about trends and using them as a strategic lever for their business, I kind of ran alongside that. And so my career kind of surfed the wave of people understanding trends.
Yeah.
The other thing that I kind of did early on was I knew that no one would believe me. Like they would think it was like woo-woo, crazy, who is this chick coming in and telling us that we have to think about the future. Yeah. So one of the first things I did is I started teaching trend forecasting in universities, and it was twofold. One, I could recruit the smartest kids to come work with me, and two, I figured if people thought I could teach it in an academic setting, that they would think I was actually credible.
So you were the influencer of your own trend. I love it. I mean, you were the influencer to influence the trend of Trendspotting, which is
I got in at the very beginning, and it's a growing kind of field, but you definitely have to have a stomach for people thinking you're crazy.
Yeah.
You have to be able to deal with people's, their own barriers to wanting to change. And then also I had to be cool with the fact that most of the things that I was thinking would kind of end up on the cutting room floor, that a lot of people might not act on what I was saying. And I think some designers really, really care about their stuff coming into material reality. And I had to decide early on that I would be okay with just, kind of like preaching to people and saying, here's what you need to do. And that it would be okay if they didn't listen.
You know what? That's the coolest part, because I always say, it's kind of like Socrates. You can only make people think. You cannot make them do. And so the same thing, right? You got to give them ideas, and you're making people think. I mean, like when I was, getting ready for our podcast, that was the first thing I was thinking, like, wow, the job that you have to be able to, kind of like be very futuristic, be very like, hey, these are ideas, but those are ideas have changed this world. Like this thing, I mean, Steve Jobs changed the world when he put this in our hands. This is how we communicate. And what is going to be the next big kind of innovation that my child, gets in Alexa right by, little dot, Max can find out, hey Dad, Alexa, what NFL game's playing tonight? Oh, tonight is the Washington Redskins playing the blah, blah, blah. What's the score? I mean, that type of innovation is changing the world, and you get to kind of think like that every day.
It's kind of like science fiction a little bit. These things feel like they would be in movies, but now we kind of live with that. And it seems really magical. And so when you're trying to tell somebody that it could be this way, just imagine 10 years ago if you tried to paint a picture of what you just described. People would be like, no.
No. I mean, 10 years ago, I think I had the StarTech flip phone. I mean, I wanted it smaller. I wanted it like, I was hoping that it could get like this big, No, those are called now earbuds. And but that's the craziest thing is that the way in which I would have never thought using my phone to watch TV or watch a video or watch whatever, but that's innovation.
Well, and what's fascinating too is I think, the pendulum is going to swing back the other way. Yeah. And now there's, I saw recently something I think it's called a light phone. Mm-hmm. And it basically is a phone that you cannot put any apps on. Oh. So it's just like a phone.
Okay.
Maybe you can text on it. And I think I am the consumer for this because you're going to crack up. But I've had to put parental controls on my own phone so that I could curb my app usage and such.
Okay, we're getting into something important right now. All right, so let me ask you the question. Do you, when you see these trends, do you think will the pendulum ever swing back to a world that is more like this than a world like this? Meaning, if for those that are not watching on YouTube, what I'm saying is, right now, the personal conversation, the conversation that, two people sitting in front of them and being able to have a dialogue, both a debate or dialogue or just really great one-on-one connection versus everything happening over, a social platform, a text. I mean, will the pendulum swing the other way?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I also kind of think, so the pendulum actually to me swings around in a circle. Oh. If you think about it.
Okay.
So I think people think about a pendulum going from left to right. Mm-hmm. I kind of think about the pendulum circling and moving in a more three-dimensional way. Okay. So it might circle back and pick some things up, but I don't ever think it swings all the way back.
Okay.
It's like there's a famous quote, I can't attribute it, but it's like history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that young people who are growing up with so many slabs of glass in front of them, they are, I think, maybe losing out on developing certain core skills, maybe around empathy and intimacy and that ability for social interaction. And so even if we swing back to less technology, I think there's a possibility that they just won't know how to have those relational skills. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of developmental stuff to make up. So I don't know. But then you kind of go, will they have multiple personalities? And I don't mean that in a psychiatric way. I mean, like, will they actually develop multiple personas, have multiple jobs, and they live more virtually? Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's sort of like they won't even be inhabiting their own bodies. Everything will be in like a virtual world. And, maybe even artificial intelligence would get to the point where they could take machine learning. And so there would be like, let's say, really multiple Chris's.
Yeah.
Machine learning has duplicated
I
you.
would like to sign up for that now.
You can presence in to whichever one you want to, while the other 7 Chris's are handling everything else.
Chris in Oklahoma, Chris in Oregon. Yeah. I mean, that would be like, I always think about Tupac being in, he's still alive and, he sometimes still comes into to places.
Exactly.
But, that type of shit, that's the stuff I'm talking about.
That's out there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, because I look at this and, you said this about having multiple personalities or having, some of the things
maybe
missing personas. Good. I get called into universities, or I get called into a lot of people that are having tough times with their business school kids getting jobs because they can't interview properly. They don't know how to have this personal connection. And I do think that there are some things that they are missing out on. And, and I agree with you. I don't ever think the pendulum's going to swing back the other way. I think this is too much part of our lives now, from if it's going, getting Starbucks in the morning, to our banking, to whatever we do, to how we communicate with people, all of these things, right? Like right now, my phone ringing, but I do think, it's how do we put our parental controls on there? How do we do that to be able to be in the moment? That's why I wonder, because when you watching trends, you're seeing the Generation Y, which I'm going to have another podcast with you because I think we need to have a discussion about what's happening in kind of the Generation Y when it comes to sex, when it comes to some relationship ideas, things like that. So
I was just reading too about something called dopamine fasting.
Oh.
It's basically where you remove all of the kind of pleasurable things from your life. And when I say this, I mean like we get pleasure from when our notifications go off on our phone or from binge watching Netflix or whatever. And so it's basically people who are taking 24, 48 hours and really totally unplugging from technology, unplugging from the things that are giving them all those dopamine hits so that they can basically reset their brain and then come back. And I'm just, it's so funny because it's really just like relaxing, but in Silicon Valley, it's called dopamine fasting.
Dude, I think that is good. We need to do a whole podcast on dopamine fasting because there's some fasting that needs to go on here at Pure Romance. Trust me when I say that, because everybody's like on their phones all the time, 24 hours a day. So, well, listen, I really appreciate you coming in today, talking about Trendspotting, talking about innovation, because it is important. The last thing, if you're a small business and can't, if you're out there in your big business, should be definitely hiring LPK for this work. I mean, I think what you're doing is fantastic. But you're a small company. Is there any kind of roadmap or something you can tell some of them? Okay.
So I think that I'll just take a second and demystify how you do trend spotting. So if I were to break it down on like what is the habit or practice that I'm doing to understand and spot trends, it's really pretty simple. The first thing I like to do is think about where my fuel is coming from. Like, what input am I putting into my life? Mm-hmm. So that's sort of like, what books am I reading? What TV am I watching? What articles, what media am I consuming? What's coming through in social media? So just, I think about that fuel and how to curate it. Mm-hmm. For your entrepreneurs, it might be going to the edge of culture, whether that's people, whether it's the category, but where is newness coming from? What's happening in the subculture? And gather yourself up. Like the old school way of talking about this would be a bibliography. Like where are you going to look for your information, and how do you curate those sources for high quality? And it doesn't have to be many. So there's fueling your tank. Then you're kind of tuning your radar screen. Notice what you notice. And that can happen over time. When you first start this, everything can seem new, but you need to kind of learn to sort what's new and what's old, what's bubbling up, what's gaining traction, what looks like it's going to spread. Then you're connecting the dots. How do you notice certain themes and find the patterns across all of those inputs? Mm-hmm. Then you're basically kind of thinking a little bit about it and saying, define the change. Yeah. This is a shift from something to something else, and why do I think it's happening? Then the imagination comes in. What do I think is going to happen because of this? You kind of dream and make that little science fiction movie.
Yeah.
Next, you say, if this comes true, what do I need to be doing right now? And that's the business application. So you can act and not react.
Yeah. See, that's the stuff. I'm telling you, that's gold, because that is something that I feel like a lot of people think it's got to be more complicated than that. And I love it, because it is, I need to go through and I need to see what I'm looking at on a daily basis, because I need to make sure I'm looking at the right stuff. I love what you said, what is old, what is new. I feel like it also probably is who we surround ourselves with too, as well.
Sure.
I have a very young office, and that's where I get a lot of insight of what's going on.
Oh, that's great.
Netflix, I hear a lot of stuff. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I hear different shows, different things come up. In style, my mom's really big into fashion.
Oh, so yeah.
I need to follow some fashion bloggers.
I think too, another little, just this is like a tiny little secret, but comedians are a great source to tell you where social change is happening, because they're calling things out and pointing to things in the culture before it's really safe to talk about them. So I think, you know, a lot of what we see in culture are things that were taboo, that are now out in the open. And when you think about it, often you can kind of source that through looking at comedians, whether it's like on their shows on Netflix or, you know, even things like Saturday Night Live or, you know, so I always kind of look at those things too. I look at the themes across the New York Times bestseller list. Like that tells me like, what are people consuming? What culture are they consuming? And what seems to be the themes on what people are thinking about and talking about?
Well, I can't wait to talk about trending of what's happening with people's relationship, which is going to be our next topic. Valerie Jacobs, LPK Chief Insight and Innovation Officer. Thank you so much for coming in today and being a guest on HIT.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And can I tell you, make sure you go out there, you rate, review. It's been fantastic. Again, live life by design, not by default. Have a great day, everyone.